The Beginner's Guide to Friendship Bracelets is a collection of photo tutorials for beginners that will take you all the way from the basics to the more advanced stuff. It is now available for purchase worldwide anywhere you typically buy books, and there is also a direct link in the description. Hello, my name is Masha, and today I'm going to teach you how to make this gorgeous friendship bracelet. While this bracelet is a lot easier than it may seem, this is definitely not a beginner-friendly tutorial. If you are a beginner, I would recommend starting by watching my beginner's guide video, making something like the chevron perhaps, or checking out my beginner-friendly playlist. Going into this tutorial, I expect that you know how to make the basic knots and have made several bracelets before, so I'll be going relatively quickly here. For this bracelet, you are going to need 8 colors. You're going to cut 2 strings per color, roughly a meter in length, and I started with a triangle end here. I started this bracelet with a triangle end. I have a separate tutorial for this, which will be linked in the card and in the description. The only thing that you need to know is the string order, which I will explain now. My bracelet has 2 gradients, one from a pink to a yellow, and one from a light purple to kind of a maroon-ish color. And that is how my strings are arranged. I have my darkest to lightest color of one of the gradients on the right side, and then my lightest to darkest of the other gradient on the left. So 2 strings of pink, 2 of the salmon, 2 of the orange, 2 of the yellow, 2 of the light purple, 2 of the medium purple, 2 of the dark purple, and 2 of this kind of maroon color. I'm gonna retighten slightly. I will first explain how to get your bracelet from this position into the repeating pattern. I will then explain the repeating pattern, which is only 4 rows, and then I will tell you how to finish the bracelet in a triangle end as well. There are timestamps in the description to make skipping around this video easier for you. So let's get into it. We're going to start by doing 2 forward knots for each of these 4 strings. So the first 4 strings on the left side, the ones that are closest to the center, 2 of the light purple, 2 of the medium purple. Each of these strings, starting with the one that's in the center, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one, are going to do 2 forward knots on the strings on the right. So 1 forward knot on this one and 1 on this one. So let's start with the string that is closest to the center. As you make your first forward knot, you want to be quite careful because that's the one that's connecting the 2 halves of the triangle end. So you want to make sure that you position it just right. And if that happens like it did for me, I'm already making the second half of the knot, but then the first half kind of started to untie itself. I'll go back, I'll retighten that first half, and then carefully but firmly tie the second one. So the first knot is the most important, but yes, 2 knots of forward knots per string. We then focus on the 2 strings of the next color on the right. It's this salmon color for me. We're still going to be working with those 4 strings that we were just working with, but now we're going to be making knots onto them. We're going to start with the string of the salmon color that's closest to the center. It is going to make 3 backward knots and a backward forward knot, all on these 4 strings. So 3 backward knots and 1 backward forward knot. We then put those 2 strings off to the side, the ones that we just made the backward forward knot with. Those can go off to the side. We grab the next string of the salmon color and we make 2 backward knots and 1 backward forward knot on the 3 remaining strings here. We then bring back the salmon string that was on the left side here, and it just does 1 forward knot onto that same string we just did a backward forward knot onto with the previous salmon string. We now do the exact same thing with the next color, which is going to be this orange for me. So the first string, the one that's closer to the center, is going to make 3 backward knots and 1 backward forward knot onto these 2 light purple strings and the salmon strings. 3 backward, 1 backward forward. Again, those 2 strings we just made the backward forward knot with, I'm going to put them off to the side so they're just not in the way. We grab the next string of the orange and it's going to do 2 backward and 1 backward forward. Then we grab that orange string from the left again. We might want to retighten that backward forward knot, and we're going to make a forward knot. Alright, now we move over to the left side. We grab the 2 strings of the next color, which is this dark purple for me. We're going to do the same thing on this side, except with opposite knots. So the string that's closest to the center is going to do 3 forward knots and 1 forward backward knot. Then put those strings off to the side. We grab the next string, and this one is going to do 2 forward knots and 1 forward backward knot. We then grab the other dark purple string, the one we were working with previously, and it does a backward knot onto the same string we just did a forward backward knot onto. Now we focus on the 4 strings in the center. The strings on the left are going to do 2 forward knots. Starting with the one that's closest to the center, it does 2 forward knots, and then the other one is going to do 2 forward knots as well. All right, we have nearly gone out of the triangle end section of this bracelet. We are now nearly at the repeating pattern. I'm going to explain what I mean by nearly in just a second. Let's start with the left side. The only difference, because I am still moving off from the triangle end, I am only going to do 1 forward and 1 forward backward knot. If you are also starting from a triangle end and you are in the same place as I am, do 1 forward and 1 forward backward knot. If you are repeating this pattern, do 2 forward knots and 1 forward backward knot. The reason I'm only doing 1 is because we already have one made with the actual triangle end, so we've already done it at this point. But that's the only difference. The rest of what I'm going to explain is going to be the same, whether or not you're starting. So again, if you are starting with a triangle end like me, and you are at the beginning, at this point we will only do 1 forward knot and 1 forward backward knot. But if you're repeating the pattern, you would make 2 forward knots here, and then a forward backward knot. We now grab the 2 strings on the edge, we make a forward backward knot between them as well. Then we grab the dark pink string here, the one that we made a forward backward knot with previously, and we make a backward knot onto this other pink string. We now grab the strings of the dark purple here, and the dark purple string that is closest to our colors here, this one is going to make a backward knot and a backward forward knot. The other dark purple string is going to do a backward forward knot and then 2 forward knots. We then go back to that first dark purple string we were working with, and it finishes with 3 forward knots. Alright, we're going to move on to the right side now, starting with the 4 strings on the right side. Now again, this is a mirror image of what we were doing on the left side, so it's going to be the same thing. Because I'm starting with a triangle end here and I'm just at the beginning, I am going to be making a backward knot and a backward forward knot. If you are in the same point as me, if you're just starting from a triangle end, do the same thing. If you have rewound this tutorial and are repeating the pattern, you need to make 2 backward knots and a backward forward knot. And again, that's because our first backward knot is already made with the actual triangle end itself. So I am making a backward knot and a backward forward knot. If you are repeating the pattern, make 2 backward knots and a backward forward knot here. Then we grab the 2 outermost strings, we do a backward forward knot between them. Then we return to the first yellow string we worked with, and it does 1 forward knot. We now grab those orange strings. The string that is closest to our next 2 colors here, or I guess the orange string in the middle or on the right, depending on how you look at it. This one is going to do 1 forward knot and 1 forward backward knot. We then put it off to the side and we focus on the other orange string. Now this one has quite a lot to do. It's going to start with a forward backward knot. It is then going to do 3 backward knots and a backward forward knot. So 5 knots in total. We start by reversing it, going to the right and back in a forward backward knot. We then do 3 backward knots and a backward forward knot. I find it easier to separate my knots. So if I know that I'm making 3 backward knots now, I'm holding those 3 strings in my fingers like so that I don't accidentally make more than I need to. So I know that I need to make 3 backward knots. I'm going to make 3 backward knots and then I'm going to pause and think about what I need to do next, which I know is a backward forward knot. It just helps me to not overshoot, basically. We then return to the orange string that is on the right, and it is going to do 3 backward knots and a backward forward knot. We then return to the other orange string that we were working with. I'm going to retighten that backward forward knot that we did with it, just because those knots aren't really stable. Forward knots and backward knots, they're relatively stable, but backward, forward, backward knots, they tend to get untied by the time you come back to them, or at least looser. They become looser by the time that you get back to them. So I like to retighten them slightly before continuing. I'm going to grab that purple string that we did a backward forward knot with here, and I'm just going to make a forward knot onto it. Alright, we've got a very small section left to explain. Let's get to it. I'll start on the left side with the outermost strings, and I'm actually going to change the pattern slightly. The pattern says to do a backward knot for the first knot here, but I don't like that. First of all, I prefer for my strings to be pointing in when I can do that, but also we're going to continue in a row of forward knots, so I want to also make a forward knot here. And because the two strings are of the same color, it doesn't actually matter. I just like to explain why I change patterns when I do it, so that you can understand and hopefully make decisions for yourself whenever you are more comfortable with reading patterns as well. So for the outermost string, we are going to make 6 forward knots and then a forward backward knot. Like I explained, I find it easier to section off my strings. So I'm going to count the 6 strings that I need. I'm going to throw this one out, and I'm going to make 6 forward knots. So I prefer to count first and then start making my knots rather than counting my knots as I make them, because then I tend to either overshoot or make too little, and I just find that this is easier for me. And then I separate my strings like so with my fingers. 6 forward knots, 1 forward backward knot. We put these 2 strings off to the side. We grab the outermost string again, and this one does 4 forward knots and 1 forward backward knot. We then grab this other string that we were working with. Again, I'm going to probably retighten that forward backward knot, and I'm just going to make 1 backward knot here. I'm going to change the knots again on the right side because I want my strings to start with a backward knot. And again, because they're 2 strings of the same color, it doesn't actually matter what knot I do. We're doing the same thing but mirrored on this side. So again, it's going to be 6 backward knots and 1 backward forward knot. Put those strings off to the side. I grab the outermost string again, and this time it's going to make 4 backward knots and 1 backward forward knot. I'm now going to bring back this yellow string, and I'm just going to make 1 forward knot. The last step, we've got these 4 strings in the middle. The 2 strings on the left are each going to make 2 forward knots, starting with the one that's closest to the strings on the right. And there you go. That is it for the repeating pattern. You can rewind this tutorial. There is timestamps in the description for you to do that easily. Continue following this tutorial until the bracelet reaches the length that you want. If you want to finish in a triangle end as well, this is actually the perfect shape for you to do so. The bracelet is already in a chevron shape. If you don't know how to finish in a triangle end, the triangle end tutorial that I linked to at the beginning of this video is also linked in the description, covers that along with a bunch of other stuff about triangle ends, which you might find useful. I'm gonna go finish this bracelet off camera, and I'll see you once I'm done. And this is how the bracelet turned out. I think it is a gorgeous design. The only thing is, I think the pink color here maybe doesn't quite fit with the gradient for me. I don't know. Other people have said that it looks fine, but to me it just kind of stands out. So maybe be a little bit more careful than I was with your gradient choices. But it is a beautiful pattern, and it really isn't as difficult as it seems. I really hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and I would love to see pictures of your finished bracelets if you send them to me on Instagram or on Discord, which is linked in the description. My book, The Beginner's Guide to Friendship Bracelets, is now out. It is out worldwide, and you can get it anywhere you typically buy books. There is also a direct link in the description. And before I go, I also want to give a special shout out to my patrons, and especially my top supporters. It is with their support that I'm able to continue creating videos on this channel, and I really appreciate it. If you also want to become a patron, the link to that is in the description. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!